President of Brazil, Mr. Kubitschek, released these 4 pictures. They were taken by Mr. Baranya, a professional photographer on board a Brazilian Navy ship that was participating in the International Geophysical Year. The UFO was seen by dozens of other witnesses on board the ship. Computer analysis of these photographs indicates that the UFO was a large, Saturn-shaped object a great distance from the camera. Similar Saturn-shaped UFOs have been photographed in other parts of Brazil and on the other side of the world. One of the most active UFO investigators we discovered in our research is retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Wendelle Stevens. Colonel Stevens spent 23 years on active duty in the United States Air Force as a pilot. He specialized in air technical intelligence and the design of advanced aircraft. He was a graduate of the Army Air Corps First Test Pilot School and at the age of 20 was a project officer on the P-47 fighter plane. During World War II, he flew in combat and was a test pilot. After World War II, he was assigned to an air base in Alaska where he debriefed B-29 crews who frequently described encounters with strange circular aircraft.
My first experience with a UFO report, personal experience that is, was when one of the crews returned and said that they saw a bogey, that's what they called them, up there that was moving at high speed at higher altitude than they could fly. And the crews later, I found out that they often referred to them as enemy aircraft or Russian aircraft, but usually bogeys. And they tried to describe it, but it moved at faster speeds than anything we had. We didn't have jet airplanes then. Later, we measured one that was flying 7,000 miles an hour, measured it on radar. So these clearly exceeded any of our capabilities in 1940s, any capabilities of anybody in the world in 1947. On an average of about twice a month, I would get some kind of a UFO report, and they would see these circular craft, sometimes close, sometimes far, sometimes more than one. I remember a crew describing one sitting on the ice pack, and this is something we couldn't do. We didn't have any way to land up there, and they seemed to be operating in airspace without a visible support base. It took a fantastic base for us to maintain the B-29s, just to support them flying in the Arctic. I even had one crew describe one that they saw underwater that surfaced, rose off the water, and flew away. Now, this clearly exceeded any design capabilities that we knew of in the world. The B-29s flying these reconnaissance missions were equipped with a variety of cameras. At various times, they got pictures of these UFOs seen in the Arctic airspace on various of the cameras and sometimes on all of the cameras. At least this is what they reported. I never got to see any of it because we took the film cartridges out, packed it in the box, and shipped it off to Washington, to Andrews Air Force Base, where the officer was met by Pentagon intelligence and taken someplace. I never got any feedback on any of this. I never heard what they developed out of it, but the stories were fantastic.
This formally classified letter, written by General Nathan Twining, was the result of numerous UFO sightings by Air Force pilots, such as Colonel Stevens described. Colonel Stevens went on to tell us about 2 other experiences with UFOs while he was on active duty with the U.S. Air Force.
I know of a lieutenant colonel, for instance, who was pursuing a UFO in an F-86 with a wingman with him, and he armed his camera, which involves the arming switch for guns and everything else on the airplane. It goes through an armament fire control panel. This man lives within 60 miles of here. He armed the fire control panel to take camera pictures with his camera guns, and the whole panel began to smoke, and all the electrical systems in it went out. When he got back to base, they found wires fused in it and could find no reason for it being fused. It took him 2 weeks to repair the airplane. But he had a visual lock-on, a visual contact with the UFO, could see with his eyes. It was close enough to see detail and structure on it, and wanted to film it with his gun cameras. My next experience with what was probably a real UFO was in 1960 when I was a squadron commander in Florida. I had a squadron test pilot up on a flight test mission with an F-100 and a max performance climb test. He was climbing through 18,000 feet when he saw an object ahead and above him that looked like the Goodyear blimp. And he thought, oh my God, what can this be? he knows, we all know that a Goodyear blimp can't get that high. He went into afterburner to catch up to it, and he began to close momentarily on the thing, and then it began to only pace it, and then it speeded up and just walked away from him, climbing away at a steep angle above him in an F-100 in afterburner, climbing at max speed. That's the fastest airplane we got at the time. He last saw it speeding away from him above 33,000 feet. There's no way in the world any blimp can get up there. And he came back and he told me about this experience. He was white. It was a traumatic thing because he realized, everybody would realize under the conditions, it's something unearthly.
Concerning flying disc reports, General Twining states, and we quote, "The phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. There are objects, probably approximately the shape of a disc, of such appreciable size as to appear to be as large as man-made aircraft. The reported operating characteristics, such as extreme rates of climb, maneuverability, must be considered evasive when sighted. Some of the objects are controlled either manually, automatically, or remotely. The apparent common description of the object is as follows: metallic or light reflecting surface, circular or elliptical in shape, flat on the bottom and domed on the top." End quote. This report makes it abundantly clear that the United States military knew of the reality of flying saucers and deliberately kept it a secret. Colonel Stevens gave us a good explanation as to why military people and former military people do not speak out about their classified experiences with UFOs.
Now, when a person working in the security field leaves the field, he's reminded of his oaths, and he's sworn not to reveal information handled officially during the time of his tenure in that particular security thing, and he's warned of the penalties. It's a $10,000 fine and 10 years in prison, and in extreme cases, forfeiture of all pay and allowances due or ever to become due. And so it's hard to find people who are not vulnerable, who don't have something to lose by telling what happened to them.